You get what you reward. Behavior has a sponsor. Make sure it's the right one. Let's begin with an uncomfortable truth. Trying to change behavior without altering incentives is often futile. Not difficult, not complicated, a waste of time. In a company I once led in Sweden, we installed a simple practice. At the top of every hour, a gong would sound throughout the office. Whatever you were doing, you stopped and took 3 deep breaths. No one was forced, measured, or evaluated. And yet, over time, something changed. People slowed down. They became more present. Reflection and intention, once invisible, became part of how the organization operated. Not because we told people to be intentional, but because we made it part of the system. In life, you don't get what you value, you get what you reward. As a society, we prefer a more flattering story, that people act on principles and that culture drives behavior. But when incentives and values collide, incentives tend to win. People don't do what you say. They don't do what you value. They respond to what the system actually rewards. The invisible architecture. Charlie Munger once put it bluntly, "Show me an incentive and I will show you the outcome." It sounds obvious, but it isn't. Most of us underestimate how much the systems around us, rather than our intentions, determine what we do. Humans are primarily social creatures, not merely economic ones, which is why incentives are not simply monetary. Money matters, of course, but incentives run far deeper than compensation. They include status, recognition, belonging, prestige, promotion, and sometimes even fear. Together, they form the reward system of human behavior. This is not a bug in our system, it's a feature. And once we recognize it, we can work with it rather than against it. Consider the Academy Awards or the Grammy Awards. While the trophy itself may not hold significant monetary value, the recognition signals belonging and achievement, influencing careers and industry standards. What organizations celebrate becomes what they produce. Netflix is often cited for aligning incentives with responsibility, giving employees unusual freedom while holding them to equally high standards. Pixar, in a very different way, reinforces candor through its brain trust process, where honest feedback is expected regardless of hierarchy. A company may claim to value quality, but if speed is what gets promoted, speed becomes the real value. Another business may say it prioritizes long-term relationships, but if compensation rewards only short-term volume, the system will quietly move in that direction. When careers, reputation, or status are at stake, behavioral changes. If you want to understand a company, don't begin with its mission statement. Begin with its reward system. That is where the gap becomes visible. If you want to truly understand the culture of a company, watch 3 things. 1. Who gets promoted and for what behaviors? 2. Which stories get repeated and celebrated? And 3. What are people afraid to say? Priorities are incentives. In large organizations, this dynamic becomes even more pronounced. When I moved to the United States in the late 90s and became head of global strategy at McDonald's, I struggled to gain traction. I had come from a small organization where decisions moved quickly. In contrast, at a global enterprise, everything felt slower and more complex. Competing agendas, endless meetings, decisions that seem to dissolve rather than land. Through my network, I reached out to the head of global strategy at GE. I came with a long list of questions about influence and execution. After answering several of my questions, he paused and said, "You probably noticed I keep giving you the same answer," he said. The answer was simple. Is it one of your CEO's top 3 priorities? If the initiative you care about is not among those 3 priorities, nothing happens. It doesn't matter how good the idea is. In large organizations, priorities are incentives. They determine where attention flows, where resources go, and what people build their careers around. As another mentor of mine often reminded me, what interests my boss fascinates me. When the system rewards the wrong thing. Healthcare may be the most compelling example of how the consequences of incentives shape outcomes. In most systems, providers are compensated when patients are sick, not when they remain healthy. While prevention is often praised in speeches, intervention is what gets rewarded in billing codes. The result is entirely predictable, and it is not because doctors and nurses lack compassion. Most entered medicine precisely because they care, but the architecture surrounding them pulls behavior in a different direction. In perhaps the most important industry of all, the financial incentives run counter to human well-being. The sicker we are, the more money is made. Again, the system is doing exactly what it was designed to do. Upton Sinclair saw this clearly a century ago. He said, "It is difficult to get a man to understand something when his salary depends on his not understanding it." This is not cynicism. It is simply an honest account on how systems work on people. And if we understand that, we are in a better position to redesign them. There are many industries and institutions shaped by misaligned incentives. Politics is one. If we had term limits, perhaps the objective of politicians would shift from re-election to impact. Lawyers are paid by the hour, which naturally creates incentives for more work and more problems. Capitalism would serve us better if it played a longer game. And I can go on. The most dangerous trade-off. Culture rarely collapses all at once. Instead, it erodes gradually through the behaviors an organization tolerates. Inside every organization, there's a quiet tension between results and values. You can visualize it simply with values on one axis and results on the other. Aligned values and good performance. Those are your stars. Celebrate them, protect them, promote them. Misaligned values and weak performance, the decisions in this quadrant are usually obvious. People with aligned values but uneven performance are usually given time and patience. Organizations coach them, hoping they will improve. But the most sinister quadrant is the opposite one: strong results and misaligned values. These individuals produce results. They hit targets, close deals, and move numbers. Organizations convince themselves they cannot afford to lose them, so they stay, and everyone notices. In that moment, incentives begin doing their work. The organization signals what truly matters. Once that is understood, people optimize accordingly. Standards bend, shortcuts appear, the culture shifts. Not because anyone announced a new philosophy, but because the reward system made the priorities clear. Cathedral thinking. Time horizon is the deepest incentive. If incentives shape behavior, then one of the most powerful incentives of all is time. Short-term systems produce short-term behavior. Quarterly targets, immediate feedback, instant rewards. They pull decisions forward. But many of the things we care most about do not operate on a short-term basis. Trust does not. Reputation does not. Health does not. Enduring institutions do not. We live in a short-term world grappling with long-term problems. The great paradox is this: the most enduring outcomes are often built by those who resist the pull of the immediate. If you extend your horizon far enough, many dilemmas simplify. The relationships you preserve, the promises you keep, the institutions you strengthen. The management thinker and one of my mentors and heroes, Charles Handy, captured this idea powerfully. He said, quote, "Set your sights on immortality, or as close to it as you can get, and most of the ethical dilemmas sort themselves out. But that requires leaders to think beyond their own demise. The men who designed and laid the first stones of the great cathedrals of the Middle Ages knew they would never see them finished, yet they built them to last forever as symbols of their belief. Today, the skyscrapers of business tower over the old cathedrals. We must hope that those who build the enterprises within them are cathedral builders in their turn. For if they fail us, then we all fail. Sadly, or perhaps not, we cannot legislate for cathedral thinking. It has, like all ethics, to be a matter of belief." End of quote. When the time horizon shrinks to the next week, month, or quarter, everything becomes urgent, and urgency crowds out wisdom. Take a moment to breathe. Set the horizon farther out. Design incentives accordingly. You cannot legislate cathedral thinking, but you can design systems that make it more likely. Incentive design is moral work. This is where incentives stop being technical and become moral. And it's what I most want to leave you with. Incentives shape behavior. Behavior shapes culture. Culture shapes outcome far beyond what any of us intend. Which means the people who design incentive systems are doing something more consequential than they usually acknowledge. They are engaging in moral work. Most leaders do not think of themselves this way. Many see their role as building products, serving customers, and running operations well. While that perspective is understandable, it is also incomplete. If collaboration matters, it must be rewarded. Many leaders are, in practice, amoral. But whether they acknowledge it or not, the systems they design shape outcomes far beyond the balance sheet. If long-term thinking matters, it must be supported by the system. If fairness, care, and accountability matter, they must be embedded in what you actually reward. A leader who wants a certain culture must ask one honest question. What am I rewarding that will actually produce it? If the answer does not match the ambition, the culture will not align either. The good news is that this problem is within our control. Incentives can be changed. Systems can be rebuilt. Cultures can be redirected, but only when leaders have the courage to close the gap between what they declare and what they reward. Because in the end, we do not rise to our intentions, we fall to our systems. And those systems will always produce what they are designed to reward. Now your turn. Where in your life or in the organizations around you do you see incentives quietly producing outcomes that nobody actually intended? And where have you seen a well-designed system create something genuinely great? Those are questions worth reflecting on. Please engage. Please subscribe. Thank you for being here. See you.